Hi, welcome back to the Coach's Toolbox. I'm here today with Coach Mike Tully, and Mike was contacting me the other day. He says, right now there's a lot of college programs, a lot of high school programs that are going through that real tough tournament time. And during that time there's going to be a lot of adversity, isn't there, Mike?
Everyone's going to have it.
So one of the things that we wanted to give you is 7 great tools to have in your adversity toolbox. So Mike, why don't you start off? What do you think is one of the key things coaches can do to help with adversity?
Number one, for sure, attitude. You have to accept the fact that adversity is part of life. You can't expect to escape it. You can't take it personally. Great example, 2001, the Colorado Avalanche hockey team lost the best player in the world halfway through the playoffs. It would have been so easy to say, well, we've lost the best player in the world. How can we possibly compete? But they pulled it together, no excuses, and they won the Stanley Cup.
Wow, that's really good. And it's so important sometimes about how they see it, and that's an important part of it too. What else do you think might be something that would be important, Mike?
Number two, values. As we point out in our book, you coach values, you don't coach a sport. 1966, Don Haskins became the first basketball coach to put 5 African-American players on the court in a championship game. And he did it against an all-white Kentucky team. It was an incredibly intense experience for everyone involved. But what he told his players was, your dignity is inside of you, and no one can take that away from you. And so what he did was he reminded the players of what was at their core, what they stood for, what their values were, and that helped get them through the adversity.
A lot of things that we've read, we've talked about, it's true. Coaches that teach values, that you have something to stand behind. You're fighting for more than just the game. You're fighting for the things that your core beliefs, the things you really believe in. Mike, this is a good time to plug our book. Mike and I put together this thing about the 10 things that great coaches know. And there's a chapter in there that is totally dedicated to teaching values, as well as there's a chapter in there also on coaches in terms of it's so much about you and what you do, what your core beliefs are that have so much to do with your program. So Mike, what else would be, what do you think number 3 would be in terms of adversity? What do you think is a good example?
Well, this is perfect for the NCAA basketball tournament because you ask yourself, where do the greatest players in the world come from? They come from the streets of New York City. And here's why. Let's say you and I go down to the corner and we want to play some basketball, and there's some guys down there and they're playing 2-on-2. What's the first thing we say? We say, we got winners. So those people who are out there on the court, if they want to stay on the court, they have to figure out a way to do it. They're playing under stress. And this is what you do. You create some stress in practice. Now, my good friend Dr. Carl McGowan, who's coached several Olympics in volleyball, has this saying, they never play for free. There's consequences for losing and there's rewards for winning, just like there are in real life. So you have to create stress in practice.
Absolutely. I think about being a soccer guy. Anson Dorrance, if some of you coaches have never heard, look up the competitive cauldron. Anson Dorrance believed in competition about everything. He measured everything. And boy, I tell you, there was nothing that made it more important than where they stood on the wall with all the things that were measured, and when they saw someone else that was coming close to where they were, it would push them to be harder, and you didn't want to be dead last. So there was a lot of pressure to keep and be competitive, and it does. It has a great influence on it. And so then what happens is, an important part of that is you're focused on the process, on getting better. You're focused on working at it rather than focused on the outcome. A lot of these competitive games that we're going to see in the NCAAs, the thing that gets them is they start to think about, where are we? Are we going to win? Are we not going to win? And that gets into the uncontrollables, which are tough. So what else, Mike? What else would be a thing for the toolbox?
Well, this is something I have to work on for sure, and that's handling daily adversities. And one of the ways you can train yourself for big adversities is by handling little adversities. Like the next time you get into a traffic jam, what are you going to do? Are you going to take it in stride, or are you going to take it personally? How about when you get into the wrong line, which we've all done at the checkout counter at the supermarket? Or how about when you're preparing supper and one of the dishes drops on the floor? These little things that come up in everybody's life. Again, as you say, Gary, you have a choice in how you react to it. You don't have a choice in that it happened, but you certainly have a choice in how you react to it. So take the traffic jam test and see how you do.
Absolutely, and coaches put their players under adversity all the time. And one of the things that I constantly talk about is, you know, in sport, so many things are a choice. And one of the greatest things is that things are going to happen. They're always going to happen. Where the controllable part of it is, you can't control what's going to happen, but you can control how you choose to respond. And the most important thing, Coach, is, once again, you talk about values, is we have the opportunity to teach the life lessons. We can tell them, say, listen, what you're learning here in sport, you can also apply to any part of your life. As Mike says, to the traffic test, to the grocery store. So again, we're getting to the life lessons. Excellent point, Mike.
And there is that golden moment between the event and the response. You have that moment in time that really determines a lot of who you are and what you become.
You know, I thought of one for number 5, Mike. A lot of coaches I talk to, they say, you know, I just sometimes don't feel like my players are as prepared as they could have been. And one of the wise little coaches that I had run across said to me, he says, you know, Gary, he said, one of the things that I always try to do is don't let the first time be the first time. And I thought about that for a minute, and I go, okay, so what are you saying? He said, think about it. If the first time that something happens is in the game, how well is your team going to handle it? If it's not the first time in a game, but it's the first time it happens in practice, and they see the adversity. Let's take the game of soccer. They go down a man. Your best player's hurt. Play on. Someone gets a red card. Play on. Things can happen. So you set the scenarios up in practice that could very much happen in a game. Certainly, we know the basketball coaches right now are heavily into the adversity. Okay, we're down by 4. There's 4 seconds left on the clock. What are we going to do? Those players, the John Woodens, they prepared their players for every possible conceivable scenario they could so that the first time wasn't the first time.
How about the movie Hoosiers? You know that story.
Oh, yeah. Refresh my memory, though.
Well, the coach, on the night before the game, he took his players into the quiet gym because they were heavy underdogs. And he said, look, court's the same size, the basket's the same height. This is where we're playing tomorrow. So when they came out, it was not the first time that they saw the court.
Ah, very, very good. So how about, Mike, when we get to the point where things, sometimes players get locked on something and they don't know the direction to get away from it. What's another tool that might help in that regard?
Well, reframing, Gary. If you don't like the picture, maybe you can't change the picture, but you can change the frame around it. And one of my favorite stories about that is Hall of Fame baseball player Lou Brock. One day he got tired of hearing his teammates complain about how good the opposing pitchers were. And so he said, listen, I don't care how good that pitcher is, how hard they can throw the ball. Once that ball leaves their hand, there's only one person in the entire world who can control what happens, and that person is me. So what he had done there with his reframing is take all the focus away from the pitcher's power and put it on his own power. Classic example of reframing. If you don't like the picture, you can't change the picture, but you can change the way you look at it.
Absolutely. And, you know, once again, you're preaching to the choir, Mike. You know, being a mental conditioning coach, there are times where I say to him, I say, you know what? It's all according to how you choose to see it. And literally, this is what I use. If you don't like the picture, change the frame around it. But, you know, it's all according to how we choose to see what's going on around us. You know, a classic example is, you know, your team goes down by a couple of goals or goes down by a 10-point run in a basketball game. How do you see this? Do you see this as that, is this the normal progress that happens in a game, or is, oh my gosh, this is it, it's now or never, it's do or die, we're done? All according to how you see it is how well you're going to respond to that adversity. Very good point, Mike. Very good point.
So again, there's that moment in time where you can choose the way you're going to think or the way you're going to look.
Yeah, very good point. Well, to close it out, Mike, number 7, one of the other things about adversity that's very challenging is to stay focused in the moment. We have athletes sometimes that are either focused in the past or they're focused on the outcome of the game, what hasn't even happened yet, or what it's in the future. And as we know, to get players to understand that the only thing they can control is in the present. If it's in the past, it's done, it's history, right? We study history, we don't change it, do we?
One of my favorite events at a clinic is to ask an athlete, okay, shoot this foul shot. And of course they can. Then you ask him, okay, I want you to shoot this foul shot yesterday. And they never know what to do with that information because they can't shoot it yesterday. They can only shoot it right now. And of course that's the point. You can only act in the present.
You know, one of my little cues here, coaches, if you want to be creative and go to the auto parts store, just grab one of these little rear view mirrors. It's a great thing because a lot of times athletes, when they make mistakes, it's like they're driving down the road looking in the rearview mirror. They're looking at things that happened there. And if it's 5v5, all of a sudden when this happens, now it's 4v4, or 4v5 I should say. And that's not what we're looking for. So to be focused on the past is not where you want to be. And conversely, the other thing is when they get so outcome based, they're so worried about the win, or if you're in tournament play right now, oh my goodness, if so-and-so beats so-and-so, then we're going to play them in the next round. They're so focused on what hasn't even about to happen yet that they lose sight of what needs to be done now, the job at this moment, next pass, next shot, next run. So to get them to stay focused, our good friend and mentor Dr. Gilbert always calls it fear. He said, you know, when you're focused in the future, it's like your false expectations start to appear real. You're so focused on what it is, and yet it hasn't even happened yet. So, once again, if you can use these things to keep the players in the moment, to remind them not to look in the rearview mirror, and also don't get too far in the future, that's another helpful thing. Mike, any closing thoughts?
Just, these are 7 really good tips that people can use to train for the adversity. Remember that they are certain to face. There's no use in hoping that you won't face adversity. It's going to come, and now you have 7 tools to deal with it.
That's great, Mike. I want to thank you so much for taking your time to show up here and spend some time with me on the Coach's Toolbox. And coaches, let's plug our book one more time. Try and pick up a copy. It's a great coaching guide called The 10 Things Great Coaches Know. It's available on Amazon as well as on www.10thingsgreatcoachesknow.com. For watching, and we'll see you next time on the Coach's Toolbox.